A few weeks ago, I headed to Pulborough Brooks in Sussex. It was a dull and overcast day at the RSPB Reserve. Well, I say dull, one of the first birds I saw was a white-tailed sea eagle, a first for me, and the UK's biggest bird of prey. It was a bit of a hazy day, which didn't help with filming, with the bird sat nearly a mile away. The bird then took off and flew towards some trees at the back. It had spotted a third sea eagle, this one a much younger bird, and it was not happy with it being in its territory, and swiftly chased it off. The younger bird kept flying around over the trees in the distance, but one of the older birds was still not happy and continued to chase it. It wouldn't leave the younger bird alone, until ultimately they clashed mid-air. The aggression continued and they made contact again. The older bird just wouldn't let up. And they locked talons as they spiralled towards the ground. Then the younger bird flew lower to try and escape. It emerged again from behind the tree line. And the older bird locked onto it straight away, coming in aggressively once again. And again. And again. This time the younger bird flung itself upside down to defend itself with its talons. But was forced onto the ground, only for the older bird to come in again and attack it from above. As the older bird landed in front of it, it seemed to adopt what appears to be a submissive pose, while the older bird intimidated it by holding out its wings to make itself look bigger. The older bird seemed happy it had made its point and flew off to a nearby tree. With the eagle excitement over, and after I picked up my friend Richard, we headed to Fatton Gates courtyard, where someone had put some seed down. Here we watched some blue tits, great tits, coal tits, robins and other small birds coming down for some seed. This female chaffinch sat up in the tree and popped down for some seed. She was then joined by this male. And some nuthatches started coming in as well. And a personal favourite of mine, the dunnock. This female blackbird sat on a post. And a little bank vole ran in and out from under the log. We headed up the hill to hang a view when we spotted some small birds flittering around in the bushes. Initially I thought they might be firecrests, but they turned out to be Goldcrests, as they lack the firecrest's clear black and white markings on the face. As anyone that's ever watched these birds knows, it was pretty hard to track them. They quickly flitted around the bush. This pair seemed to be displaying at each other. I'm not sure if it's two males fighting over territory or a mate, or it's a pair in courtship. Either way, they were very active and very hard to follow. It was a nice view from Hanger View, but everything was a bit distant. We did spot this fallow deer buck walking across the marsh, and a lovely flock of lapwing putting on an aerial display. And just before we carried on, we worked out where the fallow deer was heading, as he'd found some other deer. We headed on to the Wimpenny hide, where there was a bit of excitement. Looking out the hide windows, we could see why. There was a white-tailed seagull sat on a post, much closer than they'd been earlier. It seemed happy to sit there and observe what was going on around it. So we headed to Westmead Hide, where there was a good selection of ducks and waders. This lapwing was napping not far from the hide. And nearby this snipe was doing the same. There were a few Canada geese about, along with this shoveler, teal and widgeon. This male teal was working the bank in front of the hide, no doubt looking for aquatic invertebrates to eat. We carried on round the reserve, and we came across this bush with a bullfinch in it. It seemed to be feeding on the remains of some seeds. This stone chap briefly landed in front of us too. This kestrel landed on a post and started feeding on what appears to be a small mammal. After a quick stop at the visitor centre for an excellent lunch, we headed to the bird feeders. As expected, there were lots of blue tits. But it was also great to see lots of greenfinch, a species that's declined quite a lot recently, and I see quite rarely now in Essex. They were joined by goldfinches and some sparrows, and another nuthatch turned up too. It was starting to get a bit dark by the time we got to Netley's hide, but we found some nice widgeon and a nice sized flock of feeding pintail too. They seemed to be waggling their feet before sticking their head under the water to catch what they disturbed. There was some northern shoveler as well, feeding away at the water's surface. We spotted some more fallow deer in the distance. And these 3 red kite were sat in a tree. And we ended the day at Jupp's View, watching and listening to the waders and ducks.